I used to think love was something steady, like the sound of Michael's laughter echoing from the kitchen every morning as he brewed our coffee, the smell of roasted beans, the little post-it notes he'd leave on the counter saying, "Good luck with your meeting," or "You look beautiful, even half asleep." That was us, predictable in the best way. But lately, everything feels off. It started with small things, easy to overlook at first. His phone, once always within reach and unlocked, began staying face down on the counter. I remember the first time I noticed it. We were having breakfast and it buzzed. He didn't even look, just placed his palm over it and said softly, "Just work." Back then, I smiled and nodded, pretending not to notice the way his eyes darted away from mine. The next few weeks blurred into a pattern I couldn't unsee. He started coming home late, sometimes with tired eyes, sometimes oddly energized. I'd ask about his day and he'd respond with a vague, "Busy, you know how it is." Except, I didn't know. Michael wasn't vague. He was detail-obsessed. He used to tell me everything: what he ate for lunch, what his boss said, the funny thing a coworker did. Now it was silence. The silence, that's what got me. It wasn't angry or loud. It was quiet, cold. One night, we were sitting on the couch, a movie playing. I leaned my head on his shoulder. He stiffened, just slightly, barely noticeable, but I noticed. He smiled at the TV like he was forcing it. When I reached for his hand, he didn't pull away, but his fingers didn't move either. Something had changed between us, and neither of us said a word about it. Then came the cologne. A new scent, not the woody, clean one I'd gifted him last Christmas, something deeper, unfamiliar. I asked him about it one morning, trying to sound casual. He said, "Oh, they had a sample at the office. Thought I'd try it." Simple explanation, but it didn't sound like him. He was never one to change things without telling me. That's what marriage had always been for us: openness. We'd built our whole relationship on it. And now, I was standing in the kitchen, watching him leave for work, wondering who he was smelling good for. I hate that thought. I hate that it even crossed my mind. But when the laughter disappears and the glances fade, your mind fills in the blanks. One evening, we were eating dinner, grilled chicken and salad. I'd cooked his favorite, hoping maybe it would draw him out. He barely touched it. His phone buzzed twice. He didn't reach for it, just flipped it face down again. "Is everything okay?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound light. He looked up startled, as if I'd caught him doing something wrong. Then he smiled, that practiced kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Yeah, just tired. Long day." I nodded, stabbing my fork into my food. Tired. Always tired. That night, when he fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The moonlight crept through the curtains, washing his face in pale silver. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. And for the first time in years, I realized I didn't know what he was dreaming about anymore.
The next few days were worse. He started staying later at work, or so he said. I'd text him around 8. "Everything okay?" Sometimes he'd reply an hour later. "Yeah, just finishing up." Other times, nothing at all. I tried to distract myself with work, friends, anything, but every time I'd catch my reflection in the mirror, I'd see the same thing: worry carved into my face. My best friend, Claire, noticed it over coffee one afternoon. "You okay?" she asked, eyes narrowing. I hesitated. "Yeah, just things feel different with Michael lately." She sipped her drink. "Different how?" I stared into my cup. He's distant, always on his phone, keeps it face down. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. She set her cup down. Laura, you've got instincts for a reason. Don't ignore them. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that Michael was still the man I married. But I didn't, because deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. That night, when he got home, I watched him from the doorway as he kicked off his shoes and walked straight to his office. He didn't even notice I was standing there. His phone buzzed again in his pocket and he silenced it quickly. No glance, no explanation. I whispered to myself, "You're imagining things." But my voice didn't sound convincing anymore. Then it happened. It was past midnight. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I rolled over in bed, half asleep, and that's when I heard it. A soft ding from his nightstand. My eyes opened. Michael was asleep beside me, breathing slow and steady. The phone screen glowed faintly in the dark. I turned my head just enough to see it, and there, in that cold blue light, a name flashed on the screen. A woman's name. Then, just as quickly, the phone went dark. My heart dropped into my stomach. I lay there, frozen, my breath shallow, my pulse roaring in my ears. The name burned in my mind even after the light vanished. I didn't touch the phone, didn't wake him up. I just stared at the ceiling, wide awake, feeling something heavy and cold settle in my chest. Because deep down, I knew that tiny screen had just opened a door I could never close again. The morning after that midnight notification, something in me shifted. I woke up feeling hollow, like I was living next to a stranger wearing my husband's skin. Michael was already up, showered and dressed when I walked into the kitchen. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Morning, love." It should have felt normal. It didn't. I watched him pour his coffee the same way he always did, but even that felt practiced, like every movement was choreographed to look familiar while hiding something underneath. When his phone buzzed on the counter, he casually flipped it face down again. That one gesture made my stomach twist. I wondered if he even realized he was doing it, or if it had become habit. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound curious, not confrontational. He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Just work stuff, you know how it is." Work stuff. Always work stuff. The same two words that had become a wall between us. I forced a smile. "Sure." He left soon after, the smell of his new cologne lingering long after the sound of the front door closing. I told myself I wouldn't overthink it, that maybe I was being paranoid. But my mind wouldn't stop replaying the name I saw flash across his phone. It wasn't a colleague's name, not one I recognized anyway. Later that day, I met up with Claire again. She's been my best friend since college. Blunt, loyal, and annoyingly perceptive. She studied me over the rim of her latte. "You're quiet." "That's not good." I sighed. "I don't want to sound crazy." "You won't," she said. "What's going on?" I told her about the phone, the distance, the late nights, about the name. She sat back, frowning. "Laura, men don't change for no reason. Something's off." I hated how quickly she said it, like it was obvious, like the man I loved could just decide one day to become someone else. "I'm sure it's nothing," I said, even though I didn't believe myself. Claire leaned in, lowering her voice. "I hope it's nothing, but don't ignore your gut. Secrets have a way of showing themselves when you least expect it." Her words stayed with me long after I left the cafe. That night, Michael came home later than usual. I'd reheated dinner twice. He dropped his bag on the chair and kissed my cheek. "Sorry, traffic was terrible." His tone was casual, too casual, but the tension in his shoulders told a different story. We sat at the table, eating in silence. The only sounds were the clink of forks and the faint hum of the refrigerator. "How was work?" I asked. He chewed for a moment, then said, "Busy. My boss wants me to head out of town next week. A quick business trip. Just 2 days." I froze mid-bite. "Out of town?" he said. "Yeah, just some meetings, nothing big." I nodded, pretending to accept it, but something about his tone, the flatness, the lack of detail didn't sit right. Michael loved talking about work. He'd always tell me everything, even when I didn't ask. Now he was all surface. "Where to?" I asked. Chicago," he said, after a pause that lasted half a second too long. I smiled, forcing normalcy into my voice. "I'll miss you." He smiled back, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes.
The next few days passed like a movie on mute. I went through the motions, cooking, working, pretending. But inside, I was watching everything, noticing every tiny inconsistency. He packed light for a 2-day trip, too light, just one small duffel. When I peeked into it after he left the room, there wasn't even a laptop inside. Only a few shirts, toiletries, and his phone charger. That night, while folding laundry, I found a receipt tucked into his jacket pocket, a coffee shop downtown, time-stamped for yesterday afternoon. In the notes section, 2 lattes, 1 blueberry muffin, 1 kid's juice box. Kid's juice box. My heart squeezed tight. Michael didn't even like sweet drinks. I stared at the receipt for a long time, wondering if I should confront him. But what would I say? "Hey, I found proof you bought a juice box. Care to explain?" It sounded ridiculous out loud, but in my gut, it didn't feel ridiculous at all. When he left for Chicago, I watched him pull out of the driveway and drive south, not north, toward the airport. That's when the first real crack formed. I stood at the window, my arms crossed, my mind racing. He could have been running an errand, sure, but he didn't say anything about it. And when he texted me 2 hours later, "Just landed, long flight," I knew something was wrong. That night, I scrolled through my phone staring at our old photos, the ones that used to make me smile. Our anniversary trip to Maine, his goofy grin in the kitchen, the way he looked at me like I was his whole world. Now, I looked at those same pictures and felt like I was watching ghosts. What happened to us? When did laughter turn into small talk? I wanted to believe he still loved me, but love doesn't hide behind lies. The next morning, after a night of tossing and turning, I made a decision. I called his office. "Hi, this is Laura Bennett. I'm trying to reach my husband. He's on a business trip in Chicago?" There was a pause on the other end. Then the receptionist said kindly, "Oh, I didn't realize Michael was out of town. He's scheduled for the client meeting this afternoon." My stomach dropped. "So, he's here?" "Yes, he should be in around 1. Would you like to leave a message?" I mumbled something polite and hung up, my hand shaking. The room spun a little as I sat down on the edge of the bed. He lied. Not a small lie, a real one. He didn't go to Chicago. He wasn't traveling for work. He was here, somewhere in this same city. I felt a mix of fury and heartbreak swell in my chest. Every cell in my body screamed for answers, but none came. I thought of his distant eyes, his new cologne, the phone always turned face down. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was proof. I walked to the mirror, staring at my reflection. My voice came out as a whisper, raw and quiet. If he won't tell me the truth? I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my cheeks, and finished the sentence. I'll find it myself. After I hung up with his office, the silence in our house felt suffocating. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. Like the air itself knew something I didn't. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the cursor blinking on a blank page. I was supposed to be finishing a work report, but all I could think about was that lie. Chicago. He had said it so casually, looking me right in the eye. What else had he looked me in the eye and lied about?
That night, I couldn't sleep again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the text notification, that woman's name flashing across his lock screen. I heard the receptionist's voice repeating, "He's scheduled for the client meeting this afternoon." He wasn't in Chicago. He was here, somewhere. The next morning, after pacing the kitchen for an hour, I did something I never imagined I would do in my marriage. I installed a tracking app on his phone. It was easy, painfully easy. I'd helped set up his phone months ago, so I still knew his password. Guilt burned through me as I pressed install, my hands trembling. But the thought that he'd already lied, that he'd broken something sacred first, was what kept me from stopping. If he has nothing to hide, then there's nothing to find, I told myself. When the setup was done, the app quietly synced. His phone looked untouched. He'd never know. That evening, Michael came home later than usual. He smelled faintly of smoke. Not cigarettes, more like the kind that clings to old places. When I asked where he'd been, he said, "I had to meet a client, downtown, long day." Downtown. I glanced at my phone later, pretending to check a message, and opened the tracking app. He wasn't downtown. He was in a small residential area across town, a place I didn't recognize. I zoomed in. The street name popped up. Run down, quiet, far from anywhere his job would take him. My heart started racing. But I didn't say anything that night. Instead, I watched him, how he moved, how he smiled at nothing when checking his phone, how his replies to me had shrunk into fragments. He was there, but not there. The next few days, the pattern repeated. Late nights, silent phone, short answers. When his phone buzzed during dinner, he'd excuse himself, step outside, and lower his voice. Sometimes I'd catch words, "I'll figure it out. Not now. Tomorrow." Once, I stood near the window and listened through the glass. His tone wasn't romantic. It was tense. But tension didn't mean innocence. It just meant secrets. When he came back in, I asked who it was. He shrugged. Work. That word again. So easy. So hollow. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside something cracked a little more each time he said it. A few nights later, when he went to take a shower, I picked up his phone. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped it. The lock screen didn't have the woman's name anymore, just a text preview. "Can we talk tomorrow, please?" No name attached, just a number. My chest tightened. I opened the messages. Most had been deleted. Only fragments remained, bits of conversations that told half a story. "I can't thank you enough. Don't do this alone again. He misses you." I scrolled faster, desperate, angry, terrified. Nothing else. Then, as I was about to put the phone down, a new voicemail notification popped up. It wasn't from the same number, another unknown one. My heart pounded so loudly it felt like the whole room could hear it. I hesitated. Then I pressed play. A woman's voice filled the air. Soft, shaky, emotional. "Thank you for what you did today. You saved us again. I don't know how to repay you." My blood went cold. I replayed it twice, just to be sure I heard it right. "You saved us again." Us. Not me. Us.
There was a child's laughter faintly in the background, quick, bright, innocent. The world blurred for a second. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, staring at the floor. My thoughts came in flashes. Her voice, the child, the way he'd been distant lately, the juice box on that receipt. A woman, a child, lies. It was too much. My throat felt tight, my hands numb. When he came out of the shower, towel draped around his shoulders, I forced myself to look normal. I smiled. I asked how work was. I acted like nothing was wrong. Inside, I was breaking into pieces. That night, when he fell asleep beside me, I stared at the glow of his phone charging on the nightstand. His breathing was steady, peaceful. I opened the tracking app again. The map loaded, his current location blinking on the screen. Home. I scrolled back through the previous locations. There it was, that same neighborhood from before. The same spot visited 3 times this week. I zoomed in again. My stomach flipped. It wasn't an office or a restaurant or anything business related. It was a small cluster of narrow streets in a rundown part of town. Faded house icons filled the screen. One location stood out. The same address over and over. That's where he kept going. That's where the woman lived. I closed the app and set the phone down gently, staring at him in the dark. He shifted in his sleep, his hand brushing mine. A reflex, familiar, meaningless now. My chest ached so badly, I could barely breathe. Because deep down, I didn't need to see her face to know. Whatever he was hiding, whoever that woman was, that's where the truth lived. And I was done waiting for it to come to me. It started raining just as Michael grabbed his keys. "Another late meeting?" I asked, my voice calm enough to fool even myself. He nodded, glancing at his phone. "Yeah, shouldn't be too long. Don't wait up, okay?" He kissed the top of my head, quick, distracted, like someone performing a duty rather than showing affection. I forced a smile and watched him walk out the door, every step echoing in the hollow quiet of the house. The moment I heard his car pull away, I grabbed my coat. My heart was already racing before I even started the engine. The rain hit the windshield hard, thick, heavy drops that smeared under the wipers. My hands trembled as I followed the faint red glow of his taillights down the road. For years, I had been the kind of woman who trusted easily, who believed love meant never needing to check. But that night, with my heart pounding and rain soaking through my sleeves, I became someone else, someone desperate to know the truth, even if it shattered me. The city blurred around me. Wet streets gleamed under the streetlights, and every turn he made felt like a test. He wasn't heading downtown. He wasn't heading anywhere near his office. I stayed several cars behind, afraid he'd see me. He took a left into a quieter part of town, the kind of neighborhood where the houses leaned a little, where the streetlights flickered, and where the rain turned everything into shadow. My chest tightened. What is he doing here? He slowed down, then parked near a small, worn-down house with peeling paint and a sagging porch. I killed my headlights and coasted to a stop half a block away. He sat in his car for a minute like he was waiting for something. I held my breath.
Then he got out, umbrella in hand, and walked up the short path to the front door. The porch light flicked on. And then she appeared. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, opened the door. Her hair was pulled back, damp from the humidity, her clothes simple. There was a tiredness in her eyes, but also warmth. And before I could even process what was happening, a small boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, ran out from behind her and straight into Michael's arms. He bent down, catching the boy with a laugh that was so full of joy, it stabbed through me. My breath hitched. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The boy clung to him, giggling, while he brushed the boy's hair from his forehead like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then, the woman stepped closer, resting a hand on Michael's shoulder. They spoke. I couldn't hear what they said through the rain, but I saw her smile softly, saw him nod, saw that look in his eyes. Tender, familiar, intimate. She laughed at something he said. He smiled back. It was the kind of look a man gives when he feels at home. And in that moment, everything I'd been trying not to believe suddenly looked real.
The late nights, the phone turned face down, the lies about business trips, the woman's name flashing on his lock screen, the juice box on the receipt, the voicemail, "You saved us again." It all fit. My stomach twisted. The rain outside matched the storm in my chest. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands. Through the windshield, I zoomed in and snapped a photo. The woman at the door, the child, and Michael standing close to them. Click. The shutter sound was almost drowned out by the rain, but to me, it felt deafening. Proof. That's all I needed. The flash of light from the photo reflected faintly on the glass, and for a second I thought he might have seen me. My breath caught, but he didn't look my way. He was too busy kneeling down to the boy's height, saying something that made the child laugh again. The woman leaned against the door frame, smiling softly. The kind of smile that used to be mine. That was it. That was the moment I stopped doubting. It didn't matter if I didn't know who she was. I knew what it looked like. A woman, a child, my husband. I swallowed hard, my throat dry despite the damp air. The rain streaked down the windshield in endless lines, blurring the edges of what I saw, but not enough to change the truth. He stayed there for nearly 15 minutes. I watched every second, my heart cracking wider each time he reached for the boy or laughed with her. When he finally turned to leave, she touched his arm again, just for a moment, not a hug, not anything overt, but enough to make my stomach drop. He smiled, nodded, and jogged back to his car. The boy waved from the doorway. Michael waved back before driving off. I waited until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I looked back at the house. The woman stood in the doorway with the boy in her arms, swaying gently as she shut the door. I sat there for a long time, the sound of rain against the car the only thing keeping me from screaming. The photo on my phone glowed in the darkness, blurry, grainy, but enough. Enough to confirm every fear I'd tried to bury. I wanted to throw the phone, to break it, to erase what I'd just seen, but I couldn't. I needed it. I needed the proof, because when he came home, smiling like nothing had changed, I was going to make him see what he'd done. I started the car, my hands trembling on the wheel. The reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale, almost unrecognizable. "This is it," I whispered. "That's all the proof I needed." The rain kept falling as I drove home, each drop a heavy reminder that whatever love we'd once shared had just drowned in the storm.
Sleep didn't come that night, not even close. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster like they were maps leading me to the truth. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the distant wail of a car horn, even the soft breathing of Michael beside me felt amplified. He was asleep, I think, or pretending to be. I couldn't tell anymore. His side of the bed smelled faintly of that cologne again, the new one he always wore. It made me feel dizzy. The scent, the memory of how things used to be, the way he used to brush my hair from my face and murmur, "I've got you." Now it was like a lie wrapped around me. Every touch he offered felt hollow, rehearsed, like he was giving me a shadow of himself. When he rolled over, brushing my hand lightly, I flinched instinctively. I wanted to push him away. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to fall apart. But I stayed still, pretending to sleep. Morning came too quickly. I forced myself to get up, to make coffee, to move through the motions of the day. But every glance at him, at the way he laughed at some work email on his phone, at the easy way he sat at the table eating breakfast, made something inside me twist tighter. He noticed my coldness. That was obvious. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft, concerned. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Yeah, just tired." And he believed me, because that's what I had become, a woman whose mind was elsewhere, whose heart was broken, whose trust had been quietly ripped away. All day, I replayed the image in my mind. Michael kneeling down, the little boy running into his arms, the woman at the doorway smiling softly at him. I replayed the voicemail over and over. "You saved us again." Why hadn't he told me? Why had he kept me in the dark while I pretended to trust him? Guilt mingled with anger, sorrow tangled with disbelief. I thought of all the little signs I'd missed, the late nights, the unusual cologne, the phone always face down, the juice box on that receipt. Each detail came rushing back, stacking into a tower of dread that pressed down on me. I tried to distract myself. Laundry, emails, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. But everything reminded me of him. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Claire. "Claire, I saw something," I admitted, my voice shaking. She didn't hesitate. "I figured as much. What did you see?" I swallowed hard. I followed him. Last night, I saw him with a woman and a little boy. I have a photo, Claire. I don't know who they are, but..." My voice broke. "I can't stop thinking about it." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then her voice came, steady and firm. "Laura, listen to me. You deserve to know the truth, to his face. Not through tracking apps, not through guesswork, not through shadows." Her words hit me harder than I expected. "You're right," I whispered. "I can't live in this limbo. I need to know what's happening. He owes me that much." I spent the night printing the photo. It was grainy, blurred by the rain and the windshield, but it didn't matter. Michael, the woman, the boy, all three were clear enough for me to see what I already knew. I held the photo in my hands for a long time. The paper felt heavier than I expected, like the weight of my heart had somehow transferred into ink. I could see the rain streaks in the background, the woman leaning against the doorway, Michael kneeling for the boy, the joy in the boy's face, the softness in her expression. And I could see the lie in Michael's eyes. Not the lie itself, but the secret he'd been keeping. The one I needed to hear from him, not from shadows. That night, I paced my bedroom, the photo clutched tightly in my hands. I imagined confronting him, imagining every possible reaction: denial, anger, guilt, tears. Every scenario twisted my chest into knots. But one thought kept repeating, steady, almost like a mantra. I deserve the truth. The words were simple, but they gave me courage. I thought about everything I had ignored in the past few weeks, everything I had excused, everything I had told myself wasn't real. And I realized it wasn't about accusing him anymore. It was about reclaiming my own sense of reality. If he loved me, he would tell me. If he didn't, then I deserved to know before I wasted any more moments pretending that things were normal. Finally, I placed the photo on my nightstand. I stared at it, letting the lines and shadows sink in. Tomorrow, I would confront him. Tomorrow, I would demand the truth. And I didn't care what came next, because I had reached my breaking point. I whispered into the darkness, my voice shaking but steady. Tomorrow, Michael, you tell me everything. And with that, I finally let myself sleep. A restless, fragile sleep, but sleep nonetheless.
I waited until he got home. The air in the house felt heavy, too heavy to breathe. My hands were clammy, my chest tight. The photo sat on the kitchen counter, staring at me as if it had been waiting for this moment too. When Michael walked in, I didn't greet him. I didn't smile. I didn't pretend everything was fine. He noticed immediately. The way my eyes locked on him, the rigid line of my shoulders. Laura? Is everything okay? I didn't answer. I waited for him to approach, and when he did, I threw the photo onto the table between us. He jumped slightly, blinking at the glossy image. What? Who is she, Michael? My voice shook, loud enough to cut through the quiet house. Rage and fear tangled together until they were indistinguishable. Who is she, and why didn't you tell me? Michael froze, staring at the photo as if it were a sudden earthquake. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes widened. He didn't speak. I stepped closer. Answer me. He swallowed hard. Laura, It's not what you think. His voice was low, strained, almost breaking. I laughed, bitter, harsh. Not what I think? Michael, I followed you. I saw you. You with the woman, a child, right there in that house. Don't tell me it's nothing. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly and looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were wide, haunted. Finally, he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear, "That's my sister, Laura." I blinked, then laughed again, incredulous.
disbelief spilling out in waves. Your sister? That's your excuse? No, I swear, I didn't mean to hide it. I wanted to, but I didn't know how to tell you. I took a step back, my hands trembling. Then why all the lies? The business trips, the late nights, the phone always face down. Explain that to me. Michael's shoulders slumped, and he pressed his palms to the table, leaning over the photo. His face was pale, almost gray. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes, and then with trembling fingers, he reached for his phone and handed it to me. I stared at him suspiciously. What is this? It's proof. Proof of who she is, of why I've been doing this. I opened the phone. A gallery popped up. There were dozens of pictures, the same woman from the photo I'd snapped, only much younger. One photo caught my breath. The woman was standing in front of a playground, smiling at the camera, holding a small child's hand. Beneath it, in his handwriting as the file name, Emily, 7 years ago. I froze. Emily?
Michael nodded, voice breaking. She's my sister. I never told you because I didn't want you to worry. She had a hard time. Addiction, falling apart. I've been helping her quietly, helping raise her son. That boy you saw? He's my nephew. I shook my head, backing up a step. I don't understand. Why would you lie? Why would you hide this from me? Because I didn't want you to feel like our life was suddenly complicated. I wanted to protect you, protect us. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. I thought I could handle it all without letting it touch you. I stared at him, the photo, the phone, trying to process everything. The rage that had been boiling inside me for days faltered, replaced by a dizzying mix of shock, confusion, and something else. Your sister and the child? My voice was barely above a whisper. Michael's hands trembled as he held his own. Yes, Emily's been through hell. I didn't want her mistakes to affect you or our marriage. I've been supporting her, making sure her son, Ben, has a stable home when she can't provide it. That's why I've been leaving, why I've been distant, why the phone, everything. I sank into the nearest chair, the photo still clutched in my hands. My heartbeat slowed, but my mind raced. Every lie, every suspicious detail, the late nights, the receipts, the juice box, suddenly fit into place. I looked at him, pale and guilty, and realized I had been so ready to see betrayal that I hadn't even considered anything else. Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to scream, to accuse, to throw the phone across the room, and yet a strange heaviness settled in my chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something quieter, something harder to put into words. I whispered, more to myself than him. All this time, I thought you were hiding something from me, and you were, but not like I imagined. Michael sat down across from me, pale and guilty. I should have told you from the start. I should have trusted you enough to handle the truth. I'm so sorry, Laura. I nodded slowly, finally letting the tears fall. I didn't speak. I couldn't, not yet. The photo on the table, the phone in my hand, the weight of my assumptions all pressed down on me. And for the first time in days, I realized the truth wasn't as simple as I had believed. This was bigger than lies, bigger than secrets. It was about family, about love, about protecting the people we care for, even if it meant hurting the ones closest to us. And somewhere deep in the storm of anger, betrayal, and shock,
I knew the real confrontation, the one that mattered, was only just beginning. I stayed quiet, still clutching the printed photo, as Michael sank into the chair across from me. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time in days, I saw him not as the man I thought was hiding a betrayal, but as a man weighed down by something far heavier. I should have told you, he began, voice barely above a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, trembling slightly. I wanted to. God, I wanted to, but I didn't know how to start. I just nodded, waiting, my chest tight with anticipation and lingering anger. He exhaled shakily, finally meeting my eyes. It started after she died. I flinched. Our mother had passed over a decade ago. I'd known Michael was close to her, but I didn't realize her death had left such a wound that still shaped him. He said Emily, almost like speaking her name out loud was painful. She couldn't handle it. Mom's death, it broke her in ways I didn't understand at first. She spiraled into addiction, drugs, alcohol. Everything she couldn't cope with, she buried in substance. And for years, I tried to reach her. I tried to help her, but she pushed me away. She refused contact. Every call, every message, blocked. I watched her disappear, and there was nothing I could do. I felt my throat tighten. I had suspected secrecy, deception, but never this. I opened my mouth, but no words came. He continued, voice cracking. Then, a few months ago, she called me. She wanted help, wanted her son to have a normal life, even if she couldn't provide it herself. Then, that boy, Laura, he's my nephew, Emily's son. She's been in rehab. I've been paying for it, covering everything quietly, making sure she could get better without dragging you into the chaos I've been living with every day. I blinked, taking in his words. The veil of suspicion that had clouded my mind started to lift, replaced by a mix of disbelief and guilt. Every late night, every secret smile, every face-down phone, it wasn't infidelity, it was love. Protective, desperate love. I kept it from you, he admitted, his voice raw, because I didn't want you to worry, didn't want you to think that I had a broken family, or that it would affect us. I wanted to handle it all without letting it touch you. I wanted to protect you, protect us. I swallowed hard, tears pooling in my eyes. I had been ready to accuse him, to hate him, to rip apart the life we'd built together. And now I realized I had almost destroyed it with my assumptions. Then my gaze drifted to his phone, still open on the table from the photos he'd shown me. And I saw it. The text from the unknown woman, the one I'd heard in the voicemail. You saved us again. I stared at it, heart hammering, and suddenly it hit me, literal meaning, not cryptic, not flirtatious, not a secret affair, literal. He had saved Emily. He had saved Ben. He had been their lifeline. I whispered, voice breaking, that was you. You saved them. He nodded, a tear rolling down his cheek. Yes, every day I've been trying, and I've been trying to protect you from it because I love you, Laura. I didn't want you to see the chaos. I wanted us to be safe here, in our life, while I fought my battles quietly. I covered my mouth with my hands, the tears slipping freely now. My anger, my heartbreak, my fear, all the emotions that had been tearing me apart shifted into something softer, deeper, and almost overwhelming. You didn't tell me because you thought I'd judge you or them? I asked, voice trembling. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. Not judge. I thought it would hurt you. I thought seeing the truth would make you see me differently. And I was afraid you'd see Emily as broken. And Ben,
I didn't want you to see him as a burden or anything that could make you doubt us." I shook my head, unable to form words. My mind rewound over the past few weeks, the late nights, the secretive smiles, the strange receipts. Each small mystery now made sense. Each seemingly suspicious act was an act of care. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the weight of the misunderstanding that had almost broken us. "All this time, I thought you were cheating," I admitted quietly. Michael reached across the table and took my hands in his. "I know. I could see it in you, the fear, the doubt. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I didn't know how. I was terrified I'd lose you, Laura." I shook my head again, tears falling freely now. "I almost lost you, Michael. I let my imagination and my fears, I let them take over. I accused you of something you never did." He squeezed my hands tightly. "It's okay. I understand. I wish I could have made it easier, but I promise you, it was never about anyone else. It was always about family and about us." I look back at the text again. "You saved us again?" My chest tightened with emotion. The literal truth of the words resonated more powerfully than any explanation he could give. I whispered, almost to myself, "You really did save them?" Michael nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Yes, and I wanted to protect you from the weight of it all. But I see now that the silence hurt you more than anything else could have." I felt the tension in my chest begin to ease, replaced by a bittersweet warmth, the kind that comes when the storm finally passes, leaving both relief and lingering scars. I reached up and rested my forehead against his. "I see now. I understand, and I forgive you, Michael. I misjudged you. I should have trusted you." He closed his eyes, holding me close. The first time in weeks I felt his embrace without doubt or suspicion gnawing at my mind. And as I rested there, clinging to him, I realized something else. That the heartache, the fear, the misunderstandings, they had all brought us to this moment. A moment where truth, love, and forgiveness intertwined. For the first time in days, I could breathe. Because finally, I understood the story he had never told, and it was far greater than any lie I had imagined. The house felt impossibly quiet that night. After our confrontation, Michael went to the bedroom, leaving me in the living room with the rain still tapping lightly against the windows. I held the printed photo in my hands again, though this time it didn't feel like evidence. It felt like a mirror, a reflection of my own mistakes, my own jumping to conclusions, my own inability to trust the person I loved most. I replayed the past weeks over and over in my mind. Every late night, every secretive smile, every seemingly suspicious receipt. Each one wasn't a betrayal. Each one had been a thread in the tapestry of his devotion, his quiet courage, his love for a broken family. And me, I had let suspicion swallow me whole. I whispered into the dark room, voice barely audible. How could I doubt him like that? The answer was simple and harsh. I had let fear and imagination take over. I had allowed the unknown to feel like a threat, and in doing so, I almost destroyed the one man who had never stopped protecting everyone, including me. When Michael finally came back to the living room, he didn't speak at first. His eyes held that quiet hurt, the kind that cuts deeper than anger ever could. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice breaking. I should have trusted you. I shouldn't have followed you, doubted you. I was wrong. He nodded slowly, his gaze distant. I know, Laura. I know.
It hurt to see you so afraid, so angry at me. I've never wanted you to feel unsafe with me." We sat in silence for a long while, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful but heavy, loaded with everything left unsaid. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to erase the hurt, but I also knew we needed space. Space to let the tension settle, space to let our hearts catch up with our heads. That night, we slept apart. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my mistakes pressing down like a leaden blanket. I could hear his soft breathing from the next room, a reminder that he was there, but also a reminder of the rift I had caused.
The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't just sit in guilt. I needed to see Emily and Ben, to meet the people at the center of all the secrecy, to understand the truth fully, not just through Michael's words. I drove to the small house in the rundown neighborhood, my stomach twisting with apprehension. I rang the doorbell, and moments later, Emily opened the door. She was fragile, thinner than I expected, her eyes lined with fatigue, but there was a softness there, a warmth that made me pause. And in her arms was Ben, smiling up at her, clutching a small toy. Emily's eyes widened slightly when she saw me. "You must be Laura," she said gently. Her voice carried a quiet kindness, tinged with nervousness. "Michael, he talks about you a lot, like you're his anchor." My chest tightened. Tears threatened again. He never said much. I didn't know." Emily smiled faintly. "I know. That's just Michael. He protects people, always. And sometimes that means he hides the truth even from the people he loves most. I've seen him work himself to the bone, making sure Ben has a safe place to sleep, making sure I can recover. And I know he didn't want you to worry." Ben tugged gently at my sleeve. "Hi," he said shyly. I crouched down, smiling through my tears. "Hi, Ben. I'm Laura. It's nice to meet you." He smiled brighter, and something in me cracked and softened all at once. I realized then the depth of Michael's quiet heroism, the sacrifices, the nights of worry, the constant effort to keep everyone safe. I thought about the anger, the suspicion, the lies I thought he'd told me, and now, seeing Emily and Ben, I felt a crushing wave of guilt. I almost destroyed the one man who had never stopped protecting everyone, his sister, his nephew, me. I swallowed hard. "Emily, thank you for letting him help you, for letting him carry this burden." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "He would have done it anyway, but he worries. He worries about hurting people, about letting people down. You need to know, he loves you, and he's terrified of losing you, even though he shouldn't have to hide this from you." Her words struck me like a bell, loud, clear, undeniable. I realized then that my doubt, my mistrust, had almost torn apart the one relationship that had been built on unwavering devotion. My heart ached with regret, but it also began to soften, opening the way for understanding, for forgiveness, for healing. I hugged Emily gently, then looked at Ben, brushing his hair from his forehead. And in that small, fragile living room, I understood the full truth. Michael's silence hadn't been betrayal. It had been love. Quiet, unyielding, and selfless. And I had almost mistaken it for the exact opposite. I left their house with a heavy heart, but a new clarity. The guilt pressed down on me, yes, but it carried a lesson I would never forget. That night, when I returned home, Michael was waiting. I didn't need words. I just stepped into his arms, letting the weight of the past weeks wash away. And for the first time in days, I truly understood how fragile trust could be and how fiercely love could endure. The days after seeing Emily and Ben were quiet, but they were different. Quieter in the sense that the tension had lifted, yet heavier with the weight of unspoken truths finally laid bare. Michael and I didn't rush. There were no grand gestures, no sudden declarations of forgiveness, just slow steps toward one another, tentative but real. We started small, evening walks around the neighborhood, the kind where the conversation flowed easily at first and then ran into silence. Comfortable, not suffocating. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets washed and fresh, like a canvas waiting for us to paint over the past weeks. At home, we began late-night talks. Sometimes it was about nothing, a shared joke, a childhood memory, the way the stars looked through our bedroom window. Other times it was about everything, our fears, our insecurities, our mistakes. I learned to listen again, not with suspicion, not with judgment, but with the openness I had lost somewhere between doubt and fear. Michael learned to open up, really open up. Not just about Emily and Ben, but about his own feelings, the guilt, the fear of losing me, the exhaustion of protecting everyone quietly. It wasn't easy. Some nights, tears came uninvited, spilling over words that had been held too long. Some mornings we woke stiff with tension left over from the night before, realizing that healing isn't linear. But slowly, painfully, we began to trust again, not just each other, but ourselves. One evening, Michael suggested something that made my heart skip. "Laura, I think it's time," he said quietly as we stood in the kitchen, dishes half washed. "Time to bring Emily and Ben here. Let them feel like part of our lives, part of our family." I nodded, hesitating only a moment. "Are you sure?" He took my hand, squeezing it. "Yes, I want them to feel safe here, with us. And I want us, all of us, to be honest. No more hiding, no more fear." I smiled softly, a mixture of nerves and hope. "Okay, let's do it." Dinner that night was the first real family gathering we'd had in years. Not county holidays or obligatory visits, but a meal shared with hearts open and intentions clear. Emily arrived, holding Ben's small hand. I knelt to meet his eyes at the door. "Hi, Ben," I said gently. "Hi, Aunt Laura," he said shyly, then grinned. My heart ached and soared at the same time. The boy didn't just see me as a stranger, he saw me as family already. Emily smiled faintly, grateful but wary. "Thank you for doing this, Laura, for helping me make him feel at home here." I shook my head, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "No, thank you for trusting me, for letting me be part of your lives. Michael isn't the only one carrying this weight. We can share it now." Michael watched us from across the kitchen, his expression softening. When he caught my eye, he leaned in slightly and whispered, just enough for me to hear, "Maybe now we can start being honest. No more secrets, just love." I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "Yes," I whispered back, "no more secrets." The evening unfolded slowly, beautifully. We cooked together, laughed over small mishaps in the kitchen, and shared stories, the kind of stories that belong in families. Ben told a joke that made all of us laugh until our sides hurt. Emily admitted she'd never been confident cooking,
and I teased her gently, offering tips and encouragement. Michael held my hand across the table, squeezing it every time I caught my eye, a silent promise that we were moving forward together. I watched Michael with Emily and Ben, the way he moved with them, laughed with them, listened to every word, and I realized that the distance I had felt in him before wasn't absence or betrayal. It was care, it was love, it was protection. And now, for the first time, we could share it all openly. After dinner, Ben fell asleep on the couch, exhausted but happy. Emily and I cleared the dishes together, chatting quietly, laughter soft and genuine. Michael came over and wrapped an arm around me, resting his head on my shoulder. "We're going to be okay," he said softly. I leaned into him, finally letting go of the last threads of fear and doubt. "We are," I whispered back, "stronger than ever." And in that moment, I understood something vital. Love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about patience, forgiveness, and the courage to be vulnerable. As I looked at Michael, at Emily, at little Ben, I realized that our family, imperfect, fragile, and scarred, was finally whole. For the first time in a long time, I felt a peace that had nothing to do with silence and everything to do with truth. And I knew in my heart that we would never go back to hiding, not from each other, not from the world, not from ourselves. We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully, beautifully. And this time, nothing would break us.
Weeks had passed since that first dinner with Emily and Ben. Weeks of quiet healing, tentative conversations, and the slow rebuilding of trust. The tension that had filled our home, that suffocating, invisible weight, had begun to lift. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of tea, watching Michael move around the room with a careful ease I hadn't seen in months. He hummed softly to himself while washing the dishes, the sunlight from the window catching the water droplets in the sink. And then, I noticed it. His phone. It rested face up on the table. No hiding, no secrecy, no turned-over screen. Just there. For a moment, I didn't breathe. Such a small, simple gesture. A phone lying face up, but it spoke volumes. It was a symbol I hadn't even realized I was waiting for. Trust had returned, fragile and imperfect, but real. I smiled softly, letting the tension I hadn't even known I was still holding release a little. I reached out, brushing my fingers over the table, close to where his phone lay. It felt ordinary, harmless, yet in that ordinary moment, it felt like a promise that we had survived, that the storms had passed, and that honesty could exist even after fear and doubt. Michael looked up and caught my gaze. His eyes, soft and warm, mirrored relief, understanding, and something deeper, love that had endured. He gave me that small, crooked smile I had fallen for years ago, the one that said without words, "We're okay now." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling a long, quiet breath. And as the sunlight spilled over the counter, I found myself narrating softly, almost to myself. Sometimes love isn't about being right. It's about staying when it hurts and learning to see the truth through the cracks. Michael came and sat across from me, resting his hands on mine. No words were needed. Our silence was full of understanding. We had crossed the storm, and now we were standing in the calm that followed. Later that night, we tucked Ben into bed together. His small hand fit perfectly into mine as we smoothed the blanket over him, his little face peaceful and trusting. Emily stood in the doorway, smiling softly, exhausted but serene, a weight lifted from her shoulders now that her recovery had taken hold. "Thank you," she whispered to both of us. I kissed the top of Ben's head, then Michael's. We lingered in that quiet moment, a family finally whole, imperfect, but unbroken. As we left the room, I glanced once more at the phone lying face up on the counter. It was a small thing, yes, but it was also a sign of trust restored, of love reclaimed, of a life that had weathered storms and still found a way to heal. I held Michael's hand tightly as we walked to the living room. "We're going to be okay," I said softly. He squeezed my hand in return. "More than okay," he whispered, his voice steady. "We're stronger than ever." I smiled, leaning against him. The warmth of the home, the quiet breathing of Emily and Ben in the next room, the knowledge of honesty and trust returned, it all felt like a gentle, unspoken promise. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the gnawing worry or the shadow of suspicion. I felt safe. I felt loved. And in that ordinary, beautiful moment, a phone lying face up on the counter, a house filled with the hum of life, a family healed, I realized something profound. Love wasn't perfect. Trust wasn't absolute, but love, true love, was patient. It endured. It healed even when the heart had been broken. I squeezed Michael's hand again, feeling the steady warmth of his skin, the reality of his presence. "We made it," I whispered. "Yes," he said, resting his forehead against mine. "We did." The house was quiet, the world outside dark and still, but inside warmth and love had returned. A family once fractured, now mended. A heart once heavy, now light. And as we finally settled onto the couch together, the soft glow of the lamp casting golden light over us, I knew this was the beginning of something enduring, not because life had been easy, but because we had chosen to stay, to forgive, and to see the truth through the cracks. The phone remained face up on the counter, a silent witness to the journey we had survived. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the quiet certainty of peace. Bittersweet, yes, but warm, real, and ours. We were home, we were whole, and love, in all its imperfect glory, had healed us.